diagnosis is founded on perception, obviously. Perception. We have to be able to see what's going on. So I know that there's a range of participants, and some people feel like they see subtle stuff really well, and other people don't feel like they see anything. And so for everybody, this orientation is to upgrade that. We want to upgrade the capacity to see clearly, to find truth. All truth comes from divinity. Divine being the source of creation, is a source of truth. It is pure truth. For those who feel they have comfortable, easy, effortless access to that, God bless you. For those who feel they don't, the offering is to use the natural relationship between divine being and the physiology, which is basically the manifestation of divine being, to use that natural relationship as the foundation for satisfying the conscious mind, and also for those who have good intuition and feel that they're clear on what's happening, to support your ability to validate or verify that truth from your own angle, from another angle. So you have intuition. Oh yes, my intuition says this, but then I can validate it over here, or I can double cross-check. It's good to have lots of cross-checks. So the first point is, I was going to offer out a suggestion for those who don't see, but instead I did a cross-check and realized that what we need to do actually is to go in and do an activation for all the senses of perception, particularly synesthetic sensory perception, because that's synesthetic sensory experience is like a finer sensory experience. It's like when we experience the senses at the dense level of creation, they're very separated and specified. Seeing is very different from hearing, is very different from tasting. But as awareness takes in the information of the senses, or analyzes, synthesizes and analyzes that information at a finer level, the boundaries start to cross a little bit, because the deeper we go in the field of consciousness, the more abstract, and the more the boundaries tend to blur, and the more everything is just life, pure life force, basically. So looking into everybody's senses of perception, and looking inside the brain, and how the impulses of information that come in through the senses, they go to the various cortices associated with those senses. It all culminates into the thalamus, which then sends it's like the switchboard, sends all the information from the different regions to the appropriate locations. And primarily, we talked about this yesterday, so that it looks like we're going to be doing a deeper healing now for the inferior parietal cortex, which is part of the brain, way in the back of the brain, back here on both sides. Just in front of the occipital cortex. So the occipital cortex is at the very back of the brain, and then right in front of there is the inferior parietal cortex, and that's the screen of life. That's the point where all the input from all the various senses culminate together, and they form that picture of what's going on in the present moment. And the point that came out yesterday was kind of reviewing what I said in my own mind, and realizing the most important point that came out from that section is that we have to understand that life takes lots of different forms. And one of the forms of life is that screen, The screen itself, the fact that the screen exists, the fact that the screen has a reality. There is, at a fine level of creation, quality of intelligence that is responsible for the screen. The energy starts as pure bliss, deep inside, almost just at the top of the brainstem. They're these little organs that are responsible for bliss, pure bliss. And they have these pathways that they travel up through the limbic system, and they're hitting next to the pleasure and pain centers, into the thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary, that area. They come right up into the front of the prefrontal cortex and right up past the orbitofrontal cortex, which is responsible for feelings of achievement and reward, like, oh, I did that. It's like that's the part of the brain that gets really big and thick and activated in gamers, like online computer gamers, because they do the games are oriented so that they get rewards like every so many seconds, and that keeps them going back for the next reward, like that. And so right past that area, and then it curves up like this, and it curves up and back, and it comes back to the inferior parietal cortex. Isn't that interesting? So it kind of like, I mean, of course it branches out like a tree too. It comes up as a single, stem, and then it branches like that. But if you look at the pathway, it makes a kind of a circle through the brain, and it kind of ends up back there at the inferior parietal cortex. So the open flow of being and awareness through this channel of the mind is responsible for the health and well-being of the screen. And the screen is a key player in the ability to self-position so that your individuality has maximum capacity to create whatever it is that you want to create, whether it's health or manifesting stuff or whatever. The screen. But here's the deal, and this came up at the end of yesterday's session, but it's, again, I'm just picking out like the gems, the best points from yesterday's session, that our interaction with the intelligence of our own being at a deep, deep, very fine level. In fact, our interaction with any part and structure of ourself, even like I use the example of myself saying, I'm going to move my finger like this. When I move my finger like that, I can go, finger, you're going to move like this. Or the relationship between the conscious mind and the finger, which is moving, is one of like, my beloved finger, and it's in complete, like, when the relationship is like that, then the movement doesn't harm or damage the system in any way. If throughout life all the actions that we do are pushing, and we're making our bodies do stuff, and we're kind of forcing it out, like commanding, it wears and tears on the system. So the principle here is to cultivate a really deeply loving relationship with the self. And the importance of that is that if this is consciously done on the level of how I do my stuff, when I take food, or when I rest, or when I move my body around, exercise, or whatever, if it's done on all those levels, that it's done as a kind of a coordinated, deeply, intimately loving relationship, then that cultivation of that transfers over when we start interacting with the really fine levels of our own being, which necessarily must be addressed on that level only. It's one thing to make yourself do something, make myself wear those little pinchy earrings that look really great, but they really hurt, like that. But you put up with it, but the ear hates it, like that. Or just go with pierced earrings. The point is that you can force only so far. And when there comes a point where you can't force, and when it comes to dealing with the finer regions of your own being, you can't ever force, because these parts of the self may be agreeable up to a certain point, but then the deeper you go, the less tolerance there is for that kind of pushing. So it has to be very, very soft, very, very soft. So that's what's happening. We're going back to the screen. Remember the screen, the source of the screen. So the finest level of the screen, down at that deep, deep level. The thing about the screen and all the other parts of the brain is that they are so highly malleable. Astoundingly malleable. Much more malleable than anybody ever thought. And even neuroscientists say that we modify 70% of our brain every day just based on the experiences that we choose to have or happen to have. But the screen holds the key to the shift in perception. The shift in perception from being isolated into understanding and experiencing only the relative, material, superficial level of creation, and being able to experience all the range and realm of creation, and even that point where the whole range of the relative manifest creation, even down to its finest, melts away, and being is seen as absolutely the only thing that exists. So offering, I'm actually asking divine being, everybody's divine being, the one divine being, which we all share in common. What can we do for the screen? What can we do for this aspect of creation to make it so that truth is transparent, so that truth flows in that area in utmost capability, utmost efficiency, utmost economy? So the answer that's coming back is very interesting. It's orderliness. That's not a big surprising answer, is it? Orderliness, orderliness. And when I'm saying orderliness with my mouth, what's happening is they're clearing, a lot of clearing of illusion. And the clearing of illusion is going back through the ancestral archive. A lot of clearing of illusion. But the orderliness that I'm seeing that wants to establish on the level of the screen is extremely fine. It's like nanotechnology. It's really, really delicate restructuring. And we know that there are structures in the brain, like those dopaminergic pathways that I was referring to, that there are points in them where they're so small. We couldn't see them but under a microscope anyway. They get to be those little ends of the branches get to be very fine anyway. But in the inferior parietal cortex, this orderliness is a reflection of a value of truth, which is originated from the first light of being, the first light of life, the light that underlies all of creation, that is the essential energy that shines through all the manifest level of creation. Because we're dealing with this physical. So we're still in the manifest field to a certain degree. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I'm seeing it. So what's happening is the structure, and this is just what I'm seeing at this really deep, like microscopic level. The structure is becoming orderly in such a way that it has little tiny spaces that it's like a lattice, so that the lattice is so orderly that it's like a finely made engineering project where the engineering is so orderly and concise that fewer economic, that word economic comes in, that fewer physical elements are needed And this, I feel as if we're looking down at a very, very, very teeny level, like a almost quantum level of the inferior parietal cortex that allows for primarily the space that allows the light of being to shine. Primarily space. So the structure, whatever physical manifest structure is there, it's extremely orderly. And I'm seeing inside people's brains, and I'm just asking if it's possible to extend to any degree to any other structures, physical structures in the brain, where there's any like corruption of the physical structure or mutation or malformation like that, anywhere where orderliness isn't as complete as it could be. The bliss is a player. The bliss is a player. Thank you. Thank you. Another download is coming in, and that has to do with the relationship of love and bliss. And I really laid this out orderly yesterday, but just to quickly reiterate, primordial light of creation is fueled by prana, or breath flow. It's fueled by the flow of creation. So you've got the light of being, which is fueled by flow. But if you only have the light and the flow, then what happens is it just goes like just out of control. And so in order to support the flow of light in such a way that it does maximum good and it has most powerful reflection of divine intelligence, it needs orderliness. So on the other side is orderliness and love. But what I'm realizing, the download is that the love, we have to understand that in order for love to be universally applicable or universally accepted, it takes on a shape that's a little bit more like bliss. It's like, almost think of it as a mix between what we think of as love and what we think of as bliss. Because we're dealing with being in forms that are so unlike the physical, human, or corporeal form. When we're dealing with these advanced topics on energy work, we're not just dealing with people and plants and animals. We're dealing with being in the form of the wind and being in the form of the screen of life. We're dealing with being in forms that cannot be described in words, but all being is the self. All being is who and what you are. And to get into this, the second half of this presentation is on how do we apply. We need to really understand how this is, that we have to let go to a certain degree. There's a releasing mostly mental, emotional bodies, but also in the wiring. Today's session definitely has an overarching theme of the brain and rewiring the brain and rewiring how we think of life. Expanding the definition of what is life. Everything is life. Everything. Everything. Even laws of nature are living. Just feeling a huge download coming in and a restructuring that's moving not even at this point so much through the brain, but through the entire nervous system, because it is the extension of the neural network in the physiology, in the area of like the heart, even the liver, the gut. We have certain areas where, particularly heart and gut, as I've mentioned before, which are really major players in the processing of information. And then that ties in with diagnosis, right? I'm still feeling, it's just, okay, this is what happened. This is what happened, is bringing in, I'm now reporting because it's going on right now, which is that what we wanted secretly, what our beings wanted to achieve, was this flow of healing energy nonstop. That the light of being, the flowing light of being, has enough orderliness and this blissful compassion, empathetic love energy that has to be there with the orderliness, right? Otherwise it just becomes sort of a harsh thing. So these two, it fuels, this is like it's like the energy behind the orderliness, that it's integrated enough that the flow is not stopping. The flow, the healing flow, that means everybody's physiologies, everybody's life, everybody's ancestors, everybody's past incarnations, through you to the whole creation, through you to all of humanity. This is not stopping. And it looks to me like it's not going to stop as the webinar continues. So when that flow happens, like really a lot of stuff happens. And I'm not going to be able to cover all the details of the results of this healing for everybody. But I can, luckily, I have orderliness on my side. So I can stick to these topics and bring in as much as I can as we're going along. But I encourage everyone to enjoy this flow, because these 4 ingredients together are like a magic combination. And I would like to ask, this is just the direction that the awareness is going, if we apply this flow, or if the flow, the awareness or attention moves back into that inferior parietal cortex and into the process of perception, then can it work directly on that area to expand and clear everyone's perception, so that even those of you who may feel like they don't see anything, or they're kind of dull or whatever, that everything clears. Just it clears for everyone. On this note, I am going to bring in an exercise that I mentioned yesterday, but for those of you who are new today, there are, around the senses of perception, in the face and the head, there are points where they're like mini chakras, where the energy is more concentrated. And so there are, for example, mini chakras in the tips of the fingers. So what we can do is create a self-referral loop of intelligence, where we take the tips of the fingers, and what's happening as I'm saying tips of fingers, everybody is activating. So that means awakening the ability, any blockages to the flow of energy that may be occurring from the tips of the fingers. And of course that all starts, right there at that chakra, and it goes down the arms and out the tips like that. Intelligence associated with the trees is presenting. And again, this intelligence, we can look at it, just a little reference to yesterday's meeting, we can look at it as a being in its own right, separate from the rest of creation. But it's important to know that when you feel that, you could think of it as an overseeing angel of the trees, or a deva of the trees, the intelligence is the main structuring intelligence and creativity behind the way trees grow, is yourself. And as I mentioned before, we already have lots of structures in our body that are tree-shaped anyway, so it's all the self. But that intelligence is presenting its capability in the body. It's sitting right here for everyone in their 5th chakra, and it's supporting the flow of light. It's providing that entity or that being, if you want to call it that, but it's really not that. It's really an aspect of self, a quality of your own intelligence, very subtle quality of your own intelligence, is providing the orderliness that supports the clarification of energy through the whole upper part of the body. And so, of course, that will be supportive for you once this is establishing, it's establishing for everyone, then anything you want to do with your hands, right? So writing or making art or making music or dancing or cooking or giving people massages or anything. Right now we're going to use it to give ourselves a massage, right? So, right. And I'm double checking, I'm verifying from different points. And I guess at some point, it would be good to go into how that's done so that everybody gets a chance. We go into more detail with that. But the point is that tips of the fingers now very activated and very lively. So this is a good time now to take the finger and to touch the first point, which is right between the eyes. And I don't know about you, but you might feel a lot of energy when you do that. Not a heavy duty touch, just even a little bit. In fact, as you come closer, you can feel the energy there. It doesn't even need to completely touch. In fact, the more delicate and tender the touch, like the more the touch isn't really like, but just so you're connected, basically. You just want that connection in there. There, you can really feel how you can activate and enliven the energy in that part of the body, right? It's very cool. I need to talk too. Mouth access. Oh. So, yeah, it feels good, huh? So there's 7. I want to show you 7 points around the eyes. And as we enliven these points together, it will open up and activate the capabilities of the eyes. It increases health for the eyes, but it also supports the ability to receive, even without my finger there, I can still feel that spot. I don't know about you guys, it's like, anyway. It supports the ability to utilize this particular organ and this particular quality of sense. It's like, it's really a way of loving the intelligence of the eyes and also the finer sense of sight. So that's point number 1. 2 is right here. You can use 2 fingers for that part. And you might find that the different spots like a different amount of pressure. Like I'm noticing that this part didn't hardly want any pressure at all, but these like a little bit more pressure. That's just me. But you might be different, right? So you can experiment with that. I look really silly, don't I? What's that thing you do? Like, hello. Anyway, okay. So then this is point number 3, right at the front of the eyebrows, top of the eyebrows, right at the point where they meet. And there are others. I mean, if anybody out there knows acupressure, there's a bunch of, there's a whole series that go up this way and out through here. And so, but we're just looking at these. These were the ones that were cognized, that were specifically connected to and associated with the opening up or the activation of greater fine perception. Okay, greater ability to see into the subtle realms of creation. So that's why I'm giving you these, but there are bunches of them. You can put your fingers anywhere. It's your person. You can put them anywhere you like. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you get right on the right spot, you usually can feel there's a little more energy there, or you can feel more sensitivity under the skin. 5 is right at the point of the eyebrows, right? So they come up, there's 5. Find the pressure that's most comfy for you. 6. It's at the end. And then this is a change from yesterday. This is a refinement. 7 is right here. This is a refinement. Because I the information comes very quickly, and I gave it out, and then it refines. So here, right at the edge. There we go. Oh, that one feels really interesting. I can feel a lot of changes going on inside the head when I put my fingers on this one. Interesting. You know, we know the temples are also a sensitive spot, right? It's like the entry into the brain. I think we need to include that one. That also, I'm feeling a lot of energy in that one too. You can experiment. This is the cool thing about energy work. It's not, it's not a set in stone thing. It's like this organic thing. We are growing it. We are literally growing it together. We are growing this thing together. And it'll keep refining, and it'll keep growing, and it'll keep changing. And it's okay. Oh, hi, and a question. Yeah, a question. Can you give us points to press on or massage to increase sensitivity and depth of awareness of the subtle hearing? Oh, yes. I noticed many of them in the I don't know how to pronounce the word, but cartilaginous structures of the outer ear, right? And of course, we know that the ears are just like packed. They're just packed solid with different points, right? Sensitive points. But here are 2 points on either side, right there and there. Are 2 that I'm very sure of. And you should know, for the lady who asked this question, that when I got the download, they're points. It starts out, but I didn't isolate down for all of them because I knew I could only give out so much information but this in front of the ears is one of the spots. And then of course, all these points, and you will find them too. There's zillions of points in the ears themselves, but there's also a point right here behind the ear. There should be a little kind of a slightly bony protrusion, and it's just on the top of that thing. If you put your fingers there, you'll notice there's a sensitive spot there as well. And there, you kind of have to dig around until you find where it's sensitive. And then once you found the sensitive spot, you found it. And the thing about this point and these points is that they bypass the actual structure of the organ of hearing, and they speak directly into the auditory cortex, the superior temporal cortex, which is where the auditory input is processed. Thanks for asking. So the structure of the outer ear, the pinna, she calls it, including the back of the ear and all surrounding tissue. Also a lot of buildup of emotional residue of things heard. Oh, wow, that's such a beautiful point. Thank you for adding that. Especially things heard that were resisted, right? And can reside there in the ear structures. So massage of the subtle structures of the ear is very helpful in ameliorating this blockage, both opening subtle hearing and dispersing emotional buildup from the verbal, emotional, mental, human interactions of the past. Great point. And that's exactly, the thing is, consciousness heals, being heals, divinity heals. And everybody has different triggers that get their consciousness activated and going to heal them. So in energy healing, the idea is, this is what I'm inferring from my experience with energy healing, is that divinity, being, wants to find a way that we can all self-heal, that will be really effective and will not depend on anything outside.